Hi guys, and welcome to today's session. So what we're going to be doing today is actually working digitally for a change. So I've done a few other videos like this for the school, but wanted to add some onto YouTube as well. So I'm working from a reference, Julia Margaret Cameron, who's a kind of pioneering photographer, British female photographer from the late 19th century, and this piece is in the Met Museum collection, and there's actually a bunch of her photos on there, and they're really good references to work from if you're looking for public domain source material for portraits and so on, because it can always be a bit tricky to find good public domain portrait subjects. It's always harder than other subjects because of model releases and so on. So yeah, this is a really nice, quite modern looking photograph apart from her clothing. But certainly the kind of character of it is more modern than you sometimes see from that era, so it's really nice. So I recommend having a look through. I'll put the link into this particular image on the Met Museum, but if you click the Julia Margaret Cameron's name, when you visit that link, you'll be able to see more of her work if you wanted to work from a different one doing your sketching. But basically, I'm working with Procreate using an iPad and Apple Pencil, Apple Pencil 2, this one. So I'm going to basically just be going through the process that I use to sketch when I'm sketching on an iPad, which is a really useful tool to have in your arsenal. A really good way to sort of practice basic skills and also to kind of trial out ideas for compositions and so on when you're kind of getting started on stuff. So what I'm doing at the moment is just kind of trying to find the rough sort of size of the face inside the overall head, which if you've watched any of my other videos, something I pretty much always do. So I'm just having a look now for the sort of envelope sketching in a head, and you can see the effect with the iPad is pretty nice and natural. So it's sort of, I'm going for a kind of smudgy smudgy sort of charcoal look, and I'm using a brush that's called Peppermint, and at some point I'll swap to the Procreate pencil. They're the two kind of main ones I use. Pretty basic with my use of Procreate. Wouldn't claim to be any kind of expert with it, but certainly I thought it was interesting to kind of go through how I use it as part of my process, because most of what I show you guys is much more traditional, but I definitely do use digital tools. So I also use Photoshop for mocking stuff up or preparing subjects. Sorry, I was just cleaning my hand off because I managed to get doing a digital painting, managed to get some oil paint off my palette on myself. Just trying to position myself correctly. It's a little bit trickier. Than normal, the setup. So still trying to keep kind of big, simple, smudgy lines. We're just exploring away at this point. Trying to get a feel for the hair. Obviously with I'm just erasing a little bit now. With it being digital, you can always kind of like undo when you're drawing, but I actually I try to avoid doing that too much when I'm sketching, just because I use it as a kind of an additional tool alongside my painting and drawing. And I try not to get too used to the idea that you can just undo something. So what I tend to prefer to do is that I actually, if I want to kind of get rid of something, I kind of actually properly erase it in the drawing, and then redraw it, which sort of adds extra steps, but it's still so quick to work with the iPad that it's not a huge deal. So I'm just looking at this neck shape now. We've got our shoulders in as well. yes, that's looking not too bad. So my next step is my usual thing that I do, which is I like to find roughly the center line of the eyes, then kind of top of the brow, approximately. This is kind of our eyes, and then we drop down and find the nose and the mouth. Apologies for my cough, still not great. Still had it last week as well. So yeah, so I've got the eraser set and a kind of slight transparency. So that means I can sort of make stuff a little bit lighter if I kind of want to get rid of it. So I'm just having a look at using the eraser to go back in and check and reshape some of these forms. Make my eraser a little bit smaller. Get the side of the head in. So you can see that's sort of now boxed out the eyes somewhat. Still gonna keep them really simple. Just the base of the eye there. So I now want to just start layering in some darks for the clothing and the hair. So I'm doing that in passes, and the pencil I'm using at the moment has is probably only like kind of 30% opacity, which means that I can't go too dark when I'm doing this. You do also get like sort of pressure sensitivity options which you can use, and definitely if I press harder, even with the fact that it's got a slight transparency, it'll go darker. But if, for instance, I pull my opacity up, so sometimes you can kind of pull the opacity up and down as you're drawing, I could do that, and that's going to make it all a lot darker. But if I want to build it up gradually, better to do it a little bit less opaque, so more transparent. But starting to get these darker tones in, slightly more specific shapes, means it's sort of taking creating a closer likeness to the original that I'm working from, and that helps me kind of figure stuff out. So yeah, all in all, that's looking not too bad. So I've dropped to a really light opacity, and I'm going to just start to lightly tone in the left hand side of the face. The right hand side of the face catches more light than the left hand side, but it's quite subtle, the shading on this one, so I don't want to go kind of super heavy and strong. Sometimes I would if I was doing something more evidently strongly shaded. A little bit higher opacity. Oh, and I should also note, I don't know if I actually said, but the reason it's smudgy is I'm using it on its side, so some of the brushes respond that way, or you can program brushes to do that. So starting to get a little bit of that sense of cheek definition that she has on both sides slightly. So what I want to do now is swap to Procreate pencil. It's a bit more like a kind of, this is a bit more like a charcoal, how I've been using the other pen, but this is just going to be a bit more like a typical pencil. And I want to start doing it, I'm going to actually make a new layer, which is something that's always quite good to do. When you're working digitally, certainly that is something I do. I don't always use the sort of correction tools, the control delete sort of stuff, but I do use layers. It's one of the big advantages. I won't be going into any kind of complex layer effects or anything like that with this sketch, and that might be something I cover starting in the next half of the term. But yes, I'm just using this pencil to be a little bit more specific with these shapes. Just shaping around the jaw a little bit there. So that's not a bad amount of detail for the mouth and nose at this stage. I'm going to do a second pass over it in another session. So the last thing I want to really do in the last few minutes of this one is just have a look at the eyes and try to get them to a point where they feel like they're kind of roughly positioned correctly. They've got a little bit of life to them. They're probably not going to be super accurate. Eyes always take a little bit longer. But we'll just let's get. Eyelids in place like this. So we've got one in. Let's try to get the other one in before we finish. So we've got. The first thing I usually do is try to get the second iris in place. And I'm kind of thinking about a sort of an imaginary triangle between the nose. And the kind of center points of both eyes. So as I say, these eyes will probably need a little bit of, well, quite a bit of fiddling with potentially next week. Possibly need to be a little bit kind of bigger, I wonder, if they're quite big enough. But yeah, that's not too bad as a starting point to work from. Just swapping layers a little bit here. Yeah, that's not not too bad as a stopping point, I think. So as I say, quite a bit to do to adjust and fiddle with next week, but it's a good stopping point. I think we've got all the features in. Definitely got things to be working on when we get back to it. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this session, and you look forward to the next one where we start to sort of reconcile some of this stuff a little bit. Just sketching a little bit of the hair in here as well now. Yeah, so we'll be kind of trying to bring everything together, get a little bit better likeness to the original, but it's not too bad. And you can see it's pretty quick. It's only kind of like, what, 15-20 minutes or something like that I've been sketching. So a great kind of little way to do exercises with portrait drawing without being overly committed. So if you've got access to an iPad and you want to kind of mess around with this type of sketching, definitely go ahead and let me know how you do in the comments. As always, if you want to keep up to date with my lessons and workshops and content from the other teachers, or if you'd like to see the sorts of paid qualifications we offer, you can click the link through to our profile. But yeah, that's it for now, and I'll see you guys soon.